Imagine two people. Both have $40 in their checking account on a Tuesday morning. Both buy a $4 coffee on the way to work. One of them pays $4 for a coffee. The other pays $4 for the coffee and then $30, $35 more 3 separate times that same week for purchases they'd already made days earlier. Same starting balance, same coffee. One walks away $4 poorer. The other walks away $109 poorer and has no idea why until the statement arrives. The difference isn't bad luck. It isn't reckless spending. It's a setting most people never knowingly agreed to, a balance number that lies to your face every time you check your banking app, and a sequencing trick that used to be so aggressive that regulators eventually stepped in, and most banks quietly kept doing a version of it anyway. Today I'm going to show you exactly how a $4 coffee turns into a $109 problem, why the number in your banking app is not the number your bank is actually using, and the 2-minute setting change that makes this entire trap structurally impossible to fall into again. Welcome to Money Autopsy. This channel exists for one reason: to translate the fine print that banks bury on page 4 of your account agreement into decisions you can actually use. Today's topic is overdraft, and it's a strange one because it isn't really about spending too much money. Most people who get hit with overdraft fees aren't reckless. They're just working from a balance number that doesn't mean what they think it means. If you find this useful, the subscribe button is right there. I put out a new breakdown like this every week. Here's the assumption almost everyone makes without realizing it. They think the number at the top of their banking app, the balance, represents money they can spend right now in full, today. That number feels final. It feels like ground truth. It isn't. Your banking app usually shows you 2 different numbers, and most apps bury the more important one. There's your available balance, and there's your current balance, and they can differ by hundreds of dollars depending on what's still moving through the system. Here's why. When you swipe a debit card, the merchant doesn't actually take your money that second. They send an authorization request, basically a hold, to your bank, confirming you have the funds. Your bank freezes that amount. But the actual transaction, the settlement, can take 1 to 3 business days to finalize. During that window, your account is carrying phantom math, money that's spoken for but hasn't technically left yet, sitting alongside money that has genuinely cleared, alongside deposits that may or may not have fully posted. Now stack a paycheck on top of this. Direct deposits often show up in your available balance the moment they're received, sometimes a day before the bank has fully processed them on their end. So you glance at your app, see $340, and mentally file that away as spendable. What you don't see is that $200 of that is a paycheck still finishing its internal processing, and $60 of it is a hold from a hotel reservation you made 2 weeks ago that still hasn't fully settled. Your real safe-to-spend number might be closer to $80. Nothing on the screen tells you that directly. This is the first crack in the foundation. People don't overdraft because they're bad at math. They overdraft because the app is showing them a number engineered around recently available, not actually safe. There's a second wrinkle inside this same mechanic that catches people specifically at restaurants and hotels, and it's worth calling out on its own. When you pay for dinner and leave a tip, the card machine typically sends an initial authorization for the pre-tip amount, sometimes with a padded estimate added on top, often 20% higher than the bill, to account for whatever tip you might add. That padded hold sits on your account frozen until the final tip amount settles a day or 2 later, and the hold adjusts down to the real number. In the meantime, your available balance looks smaller than it actually needs to be. And if you're running close to the edge, that extra padding can be the difference between a transaction clearing cleanly and one triggering a decline, or worse, a covered overdraft you didn't see coming. Let me make this concrete with the story I opened on. A woman we'll call Priya has $40 in checking on a Tuesday. She buys a $4 coffee. Card declines are rare for small holds like this, so it goes through, dropping her available balance to $36. Wednesday, a gym membership she forgot to cancel autodrafts $30. Balance drops to $6, still technically positive. Thursday morning, a streaming subscription she also forgot about tries to pull $15. Here's where it goes wrong. The $15 doesn't just fail. Because Priya opted into overdraft coverage back when she opened the account. Most people do, often without realizing it because it's framed as a convenience feature during sign-up. The bank covers the $15 anyway, pushing her account to negative $9. That triggers an overdraft fee, typically $35. Now she's at negative $44. Friday, the coffee shop transaction from Tuesday, remember it was only a hold, not a settled transaction, finally clears. It settles fine. No new fee there. But Saturday, a $12 parking app charge she forgot about also tries to go through against an account that's still negative. Same story. Covered, another $35 fee. Now she's at negative $91. By the time she notices anything is wrong, 3 fees have stacked. 2 overdraft fees plus, in some bank systems, a daily extended overdraft fee for remaining negative multiple days in a row. Total damage on a $4 coffee she barely remembers buying. Over $100. Spread across 5 days of automatic transactions she'd already made peace with as already paid for. Nobody in this story did anything reckless. Every single charge was something Priya expected to happen. The problem wasn't spending. It was a stack of small, forgotten, already committed transactions landing on a balance number that looked fine on the surface and wasn't. Compare that to a second, quieter version of the same week. A coworker of Priya's, banking at a small regional credit union, hits the exact same sequence of transactions on the exact same balance. Her account has a standing $50 buffer built in, meaning the bank simply won't charge a fee unless the negative balance exceeds $50, plus a policy of only ever charging 1 overdraft fee per day, no matter how many transactions try to post. Same coffee, same forgotten subscription, same parking charge. Her total cost for the week, $0, because none of the individual shortfalls ever cleared the buffer, and the one day she did dip slightly negative resolved itself before the buffer threshold was crossed. Same financial behavior, same mistakes, 2 completely different outcomes, purely because of which institution was holding the account and what fee structure it had built in. This is why the fine print genuinely matters here, in a way it doesn't for most banking decisions. Overdraft policy differences between 2 accounts can be worth over $100 in a single ordinary week. You might think, okay, that's a rough week, but how big a business is this really for banks? It's bigger than almost anyone assumes. Overdraft and related fees have generated billions of dollars in annual revenue across U.S. banks in recent years, and multiple studies on this have found the same lopsided pattern every time. A small percentage of account holders, often those living closest to the edge of their balance, account for the overwhelming majority of the fees collected. This isn't spread evenly across every customer. It concentrates hard on people who can least absorb it, which is exactly why regulators have circled back to this topic repeatedly over the past 2 decades. The mechanics that make it worse aren't accidental either. For years, a well-documented practice at many banks was transaction reordering, processing the largest transaction of the day first, even if it wasn't the first one you made, so that your balance would run out of room to cover the smaller, cheaper items too. Do that, and instead of 1 overdraft fee for the transaction that actually caused the shortfall, a customer could trigger 4 or 5, 1 for each smaller purchase that now had nothing left to draw from. Lawsuits and settlements over exactly this practice, largest first reordering, cost several major banks hundreds of millions of dollars combined. Most banks have since moved to chronological ordering by default, but most is doing some work in that sentence. Always confirm your own bank's stated policy rather than assuming. It's worth understanding why largest first ordering was ever appealing to a bank in the first place, because it clarifies the incentive at play. Picture a customer with $100 in their account who makes 3 purchases in a single day. A $10 charge, a $15 charge, and an $85 charge in that exact order. Processed chronologically, the first 2 clear fine, and only the third, the $85 charge, overdraws the account, generating 1 fee. Processed largest first, the $85 charge goes through first, immediately draining the balance to $15, which means the $10 charge still clears, but the $15 charge now also overdraws, generating a second fee for a purchase that would have cleared cleanly under the original order. Same 3 purchases, Same total spending, but one fee versus two, purely as a function of processing sequence. Multiply that pattern across millions of accounts and thousands of transactions a day, and the revenue difference becomes substantial, which is precisely why regulators and class action lawsuits eventually forced the issue. Here's the legal detail almost nobody knows, and it's the single most useful fact in this entire video. For one-time debit card purchases and ATM withdrawals, banks are legally required to get your opt-in consent before they can charge you an overdraft fee on those transaction types. This has been federal law since 2010, under what's known as Regulation E. Without your opt-in, a debit card purchase that would overdraft your account should simply be declined at the register. No fee, just an awkward moment and a declined card. The catch, this opt-in requirement only covers one-time debit card and ATM transactions. It does not cover checks, ACH transfers, or recurring automatic payments. Those can still overdraft and trigger fees even if you never opted into anything, because the rule specifically carves them out. And critically, most people did opt in, often during account opening, often through a screen that framed it as avoid decline transactions, rather than agree to pay $35 fees. If you don't remember explicitly choosing this, there's a good chance it happened during onboarding without you registering the decision as a real choice. So here's the fix, and it takes about 2 minutes. Log into your bank's website or call them directly and ask specifically about your overdraft opt-in status for one-time debit card transactions. Don't just ask if you have overdraft protection. That phrase gets used loosely and can mean different things depending on who you're talking to. Ask specifically about the Reg E opt-in. If you're opted in, you can opt back out. Once you do, one-time debit card purchases and ATM withdrawals that would overdraft your account get declined instead of covered and charged. You lose the convenience of the purchase going through anyway. You gain complete structural immunity from overdraft fees on that entire category of transaction. For most people, an awkward decline at checkout is a dramatically better outcome than a $35 fee discovered 3 days later. For the transaction types that fall outside this protection, checks, ACH, recurring payments, the fix is different. Set up low balance alerts. Every major bank supports text or push notifications when your balance drops below a threshold you choose. Set that threshold well above zero, somewhere around $75 to $100 depending on your typical spending, so you get a warning while there's still time to transfer money in before an automatic payment hits. A second layer worth setting up if your bank offers it. Overdraft transfer linking, where a shortfall pulls automatically from a linked savings account instead of triggering a fee. This isn't the same as the debit card opt-in. It's a separate, usually free or low-cost service that acts as a buffer specifically for the ACH and check transactions that Reg E doesn't cover. Ask your bank if this exists and what, if anything, it costs. Some charge a flat transfer fee that's still far cheaper than a full overdraft fee. Others offer it free. There's a trap in the opposite direction worth a direct warning. Don't let the fear of overdraft fees push you toward high-cost cash advance or instant access apps that charge steep subscription fees or tips that function as disguised interest rates on very short-term advances. Some of these products are genuinely useful and cheap when used occasionally and transparently. Others carry effective annual costs that rival or exceed the overdraft fees they're marketing themselves as an alternative to. If you're considering one, work out the actual dollar cost of what you're being charged for a few days of early access to your own money, and compare that number directly against the $35 fee you're trying to avoid, not against the anxiety of the situation. If you're rebuilding after a rough stretch with your bank, several overdrafts, maybe an account that got closed and reported to a banking history database like check systems, you're not out of options. Many banks now offer second chance checking accounts specifically designed for this situation. They typically strip out overdraft coverage entirely, meaning transactions simply decline if you don't have the funds, with no fee attached either way. It's a more restrictive account, but for someone rebuilding trust with the banking system, restrictive but fee-free often beats flexible but expensive. A few quick answers to the questions that come up constantly around this topic. Does an overdraft fee affect my credit score? Generally, no. A single overdraft itself typically isn't reported to the major credit bureaus. Where it can catch up with you is if the negative balance goes unpaid long enough that the bank charges it off and sends it to collections, which can absolutely hit your credit report. The fee itself isn't the danger. Letting it sit unresolved is. If I opt out of overdraft coverage, will my card randomly stop working for normal purchases? No. Opting out only changes what happens in the specific moment a transaction would push your balance negative. Every purchase within your actual available balance processes exactly as it always did. Can a bank charge me multiple overdraft fees in a single day? Many banks cap the number of overdraft fees they'll charge per day, often somewhere between 3 and 6, but the cap itself varies significantly by institution. Some have eliminated daily caps in favor of lower per fee amounts. Others still allow several fees to stack. Check your specific account's fee schedule rather than assuming a standard number. Is there a difference between an overdraft fee and a non-sufficient funds fee? Yes. An overdraft fee is charged when the bank covers a transaction that exceeds your balance. An NSF fee is charged when the bank declines a transaction instead of covering it. Depending on your account settings, you could see either one for the exact same underlying event, and the dollar amounts frequently differ between the two. Do all banks charge roughly the same overdraft fee? No, and the range is wider than most people assume. Traditional fees have historically clustered in the $30 to $36 range at many large banks, but plenty of credit unions and online first banks charge substantially less. Cap the number of fees per day more aggressively, or build in a buffer amount, sometimes $10, sometimes $50, below which no fee applies at all. If you're shopping for a new account, the overdraft fee schedule is a genuinely useful comparison point, not just interest rates or minimum balance requirements. What's a grace period on overdraft, and do I have one? Some banks offer a short window, often until the end of the next business day, to deposit enough money to bring your balance back positive before the fee is actually charged. This isn't universal, and it isn't automatic in the sense that you still need to notice the negative balance and act. But if your bank offers it, it functions as a free safety net for exactly the kind of forgotten subscription scenario in Priya's story. Ask your bank directly whether a grace period applies to your account type. One more thing worth watching, because the ground here has been shifting. Overdraft fee structures have faced increasing regulatory attention in recent years, with some major banks voluntarily lowering fees, adding buffer amounts before a fee triggers, or eliminating certain overdraft fee categories entirely as a competitive move. If you haven't checked your specific bank's current overdraft policy in the last year or two, it's worth a fresh look. What was true about your account when you opened it may not reflect the current fee schedule. 5 things to take away. 1. The balance shown in your banking app is not automatically the balance that's safe to spend. Pending holds, including padded restaurant and hotel authorizations, and still processing deposits can both distort it in opposite directions, sometimes on the same day. 2. Check your specific opt-in status for Regulation E overdraft coverage on one-time debit card and ATM transactions. If you're opted in and didn't consciously choose that, opt back out. It converts a $35 surprise fee into a simple decline transaction with zero cost either way. 3. Set a low balance alert well above zero, since checks, ACH transfers, and recurring payments fall outside the debit card opt-in protection entirely and can still overdraft your account regardless of your Reg E settings. 4. If your bank offers linked account overdraft transfers, set them up as a second layer of protection for the transaction types Reg E doesn't cover, and ask directly what, if anything, that transfer service costs. 5. Before reaching for a paid, instant access app to avoid an overdraft fee, work out its actual dollar cost and compare it honestly against the fee itself. Sometimes the cure costs more than the disease, and the comparison only takes a minute of arithmetic. Here's the exercise. Open your banking app right now or call your bank and ask one specific question. Am I opted into overdraft coverage for one-time debit card and ATM transactions? Write down the answer. If it's yes and you don't remember choosing it, decide today whether you want to keep it. While you're at it, ask about your bank's daily fee cap and whether a buffer amount or grace period applies to your account. Both are free questions that take 30 seconds each and could save you real money the next time a forgotten subscription tries to pull from an account that's thinner than it looks. If this saved you a fee, or explained one that already happened, the subscribe button does more for this channel than any single view. I break down one piece of the system like this every week. How the number gets calculated, why it moves the way it does, and what you're actually supposed to do about it. That's it for this one. This has been Money Autopsy. I'll see you in the next breakdown.